A homeless Navy SEAL's dog uncovered a hidden staircase beneath an old cabin, leading to a secret worth $265 million. A homeless Navy SEAL inherited an old cabin. His dog uncovered a hidden $265 million secret. Jack Mercer had lost almost everything: his home, his career, and nearly his faith in the future. Living out of a battered pickup with only his loyal German shepherd, Rex, he never imagined a forgotten mountain cabin in Montana would change his life. But when Rex refused to leave an old stone fireplace alone, he uncovered a secret buried for decades, one powerful enough to expose betrayal, test loyalty, and reveal a fortune nobody knew existed. Comment 1 if you'd follow your dog's instincts, or 0 if you'd walk away, and tell us where you're watching from. The November rain came down in cold silver sheets across the outskirts of Spokane, Washington, turning the truck stop parking lot into a landscape of puddles and reflected headlights. Most people hurried from their vehicles to the diner entrance without looking around. Nobody noticed the faded blue pickup parked near the far fence. Nobody noticed the man living inside it. And nobody noticed the German shepherd standing guard beside the truck, as if the entire world depended on him. Jack Mercer sat in the driver's seat, staring through a windshield streaked with rain. At 42 years old, he looked older than his age. Years of military service, hard labor, and harder luck had carved deep lines into his face. His dark hair was beginning to gray around the temples. His shoulders remained broad. His hands still carried the strength of a Navy SEAL. But his eyes told a different story. They carried the weight of things he could never forget. The dashboard clock read 5:17 a.m. Another night survived. Another morning with nowhere to go. Beside the truck, Rex lifted his head and scanned the parking lot. The 7-year-old German shepherd had once been one of the military's most respected working dogs. His black and tan coat had faded slightly with age, but his posture remained proud, alert, protective, loyal. The dog's amber eyes never stopped moving, watching, assessing, guarding, the way he had done overseas, the way he still did now. Jack opened the truck door. Cold air rushed inside. Rex immediately stepped closer. The dog's tail wagged once, not excited, just reassuring. A simple message. "I'm here." Jack managed a tired smile. "Morning, partner." Rex leaned his head briefly against Jack's leg. The gesture lasted only a second, yet somehow it made the day easier. Jack stepped out onto the wet pavement and stretched his aching back. Sleeping in a truck never got easier, especially after 3 years. 3 years since everything had fallen apart. 3 years since the nightmares became stronger than the man fighting them. 3 years since employers stopped calling back. 3 years since family members slowly stopped answering the phone. The diner lights glowed through the rain. Jack checked his wallet. $11. Enough for coffee, maybe eggs if he skipped dinner. He looked down at Rex. The dog came first. Always. Inside the truck sat a bag containing dog food purchased 2 days earlier. Rex would eat. Jack would figure the rest out. The diner bell jingled as they entered. Warm air wrapped around them. The smell of coffee, bacon, and fresh biscuits filled the room. Several customers glanced at Rex. Most smiled. Everyone liked Rex. The dog had a way of earning trust instantly. Maybe because he looked like he belonged somewhere. Maybe because people could sense the discipline in him. The waitress behind the counter looked up. "Morning, Jack." "Morning, Nancy." Nancy had worked there nearly 20 years. She knew exactly how hard things had become. She never asked questions, never offered pity. She simply filled his coffee cup whenever he came in. That kindness meant more than she realized. Rex settled beside the booth, perfectly still, perfectly trained. Nancy placed a bowl of water in front of him. The dog looked at Jack before drinking, waiting for permission. Some habits never disappeared. "Go ahead, buddy." Only then did Rex lower his head. Nancy shook her head with a smile. "Smartest dog I've ever seen." Jack rubbed Rex's ears. "Smarter than most people I know." Nancy laughed. For a moment everything felt normal. Then the sound came. A tray crashed somewhere in the kitchen. Metal striking tile. The sharp noise exploded through the diner. Jack's body reacted instantly. The coffee cup nearly slipped from his hand. His pulse spiked. His breathing changed. Suddenly he wasn't sitting in a diner. Suddenly he wasn't in Washington. Suddenly he was somewhere else. A different country, a different year, a different nightmare. Gunfire, dust, smoke, screaming, the radio crackling, the mission collapsing, men shouting names, blood on concrete. The memory hit him like a freight train. His vision narrowed. His hands trembled. The panic was coming, fast. But before it could take control, something warm touched his knee. Rex. The German shepherd had already moved. The dog pressed against him. Steady, grounded, present. Jack lowered his eyes. Rex stared directly at him. Focused. Calm. The trained response. The same one military handlers had reinforced thousands of times. The same one that had saved Jack countless times before. The dog gently placed a paw on his leg. The diner disappeared. The memory loosened its grip. The panic retreated. Slowly. Breath by breath. Jack reached down and gripped the dog's collar. Good boy. Rex didn't move. Not until Jack's breathing returned to normal. Not until the danger had passed. Nancy pretended not to notice, which somehow made Jack grateful. The hardest part of PTSD wasn't the memories. It was the shame. The feeling that everyone could see the damage. The feeling that you were broken. The feeling that you no longer belonged anywhere. Outside, the rain continued falling. Inside, the world moved on. People drank coffee, read newspapers, talked about football games and weather forecasts. Nobody knew how much effort it took for Jack Mercer to simply sit in a booth and survive breakfast. And that was fine. He preferred it that way. After eating, Jack and Rex returned to the truck. The rain had eased. Gray clouds hung low across the horizon. Jack climbed behind the wheel and unfolded a notebook. The pages contained job applications, construction companies, warehouses, security firms, dozens of attempts, dozens of rejections. Most interviews ended the same way. Everything went well until someone asked about the employment gap, or the PTSD, or why he didn't have a permanent address. After that, doors closed, sometimes politely, sometimes not. The truck's engine started with a rough growl. Jack drove toward downtown Spokane. A Veterans Resource Center opened at 9. Maybe there would be leads. Maybe there wouldn't. Rex sat quietly in the passenger seat, watching the road, watching Jack. Always watching. The city passed by in wet gray colors. Traffic lights, bus stops, office buildings, people rushing toward jobs and routines, lives that made sense. Jack couldn't remember the last time his own life had made sense. At a stoplight, he found himself staring at a father walking beside his young son. The boy laughed about something. The father smiled. Simple, ordinary, normal. The sight hurt more than he expected, because once upon a time Jack had imagined a life like that. A family, a house, a future. Then came deployments, losses, nightmares, divorce, everything else. The light turned green. The moment disappeared. The Veterans Center offered no jobs, only pamphlets, waiting lists, polite apologies. By late afternoon, the sky had darkened again. Snow threatened in the distance. Winter was coming. Jack parked near a wooded area outside the city limits, one of the few places he could spend the night without being bothered. Rex jumped from the truck. The dog immediately began exploring the tree line. His movements remained athletic despite his age. Jack watched him with quiet affection. Rex had served beside him in Afghanistan. They had survived mortar attacks, ambushes, long nights, impossible missions. The dog had found explosives before humans could, warned patrols about danger, saved lives, saved Jack's life more than once. When Rex retired from service, Jack adopted him without hesitation. There had never been another option. You didn't abandon family, not real family. The sun disappeared behind dark clouds. Temperatures dropped quickly. Jack built a small fire inside a designated campsite ring and heated a can of soup, half for him, half for Rex. The dog accepted the arrangement without complaint. He always did. Darkness settled over the forest. The stars vanished behind thick clouds. Wind moved through the pines. The world grew quiet. Too quiet. Jack climbed into the truck shortly after midnight. Rex curled up beside the seat. The familiar arrangement. The familiar routine. The familiar battle. Because sleep always brought the same enemy. The nightmare arrived just before dawn. It always did. The explosion. The failed mission. The teammate he couldn't save. The helplessness. The guilt. The terrible certainty that somehow he should have done more. Jack jerked awake, breathing hard, heart pounding, sweat covering his face despite the cold. For one terrifying moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Then a wet nose touched his hand. Rex. The dog was already awake, already working, already pulling him back. Jack closed his eyes. His breathing gradually slowed. Outside, the first pale hint of morning appeared beyond the trees. Another night survived. Another battle won. Barely. Jack scratched behind Rex's ears. The German shepherd leaned into the touch. Neither of them knew it yet. But somewhere hundreds of miles away in the mountains of Montana, a letter was waiting. A letter written by a dead man. A letter that would change everything. A letter that would lead them toward a forgotten cabin. A hidden fortune. And a secret that only Rex could uncover. The first light of dawn touched the horizon, and for the first time in years, fate had finally begun moving in Jack Mercer's direction. He just didn't know it yet. The morning air was sharp with the promise of winter as Jack stepped out of the pickup truck and stretched his stiff muscles. Frost coated the grass around the campsite, turning the world silver beneath the growing sunlight. Rex emerged beside him and shook out his thick coat. The German shepherd immediately began scanning the woods, always alert, always working. Jack sometimes wondered if the dog knew how much that mattered. The world felt safer when Rex was watching it. The two shared breakfast beside the truck. A cup of instant coffee for Jack. A bowl of kibble for Rex, nothing fancy. Nothing remarkable. Just another morning in a life that had become painfully predictable. By mid-morning, they were back in Spokane. Jack parked near the public library. The building opened at 9. It was one of the few places where nobody asked questions. Nobody cared how long he stayed. Nobody judged him for carrying everything he owned inside a worn duffel bag. Rex settled near the entrance while Jack checked his email on one of the public computers. Most mornings brought nothing. Rejection notices, expired applications, silence. Today was different. One message immediately caught his attention. The sender was unfamiliar. Finch, Holloway, and Pierce attorneys at law, Helena, Montana. Jack frowned. He almost deleted it. Then he noticed the subject line, regarding the estate of Walter Mercer. His pulse slowed. then quickened. Walter Mercer. The name stirred something distant in his memory. An old photograph. A funeral. A man standing quietly at the edge of a crowd. Nothing more. Jack clicked the email open. The message was brief. Professional. Direct. Mr. Jack Mercer. We have been attempting to reach you regarding the estate of your late uncle, Walter James Mercer. You have been named the sole beneficiary of his property and holdings. Please contact our office immediately regarding matters requiring your attention. Respectfully, Harold Finch, Senior Partner. Jack stared at the screen, then read it again, and again. The words remained unchanged. Sole beneficiary, property, holdings, Walter Mercer. Rex lifted his head from across the room, as if sensing something. Jack sat perfectly still. His life had conditioned him not to trust good news. Good news usually came attached to disappointment, or hidden costs, or mistakes. Yet something about the message felt real. His hands moved almost automatically. He dialed the number listed beneath the signature. The call connected after 2 rings. Finch, Holloway, and Pierce. This is Jack Mercer. A pause followed. Then a man's voice filled the line. Warm, professional, relieved. Mr. Mercer, I've been trying to locate you for nearly 3 weeks. Jack swallowed. What is this about? Your uncle, Walter Mercer. The name sounded strange, foreign, like a piece of family history buried under decades of distance. I'm sorry to inform you that Mr. Mercer passed away 4 months ago. Jack looked down. Not because he felt overwhelming grief. The truth was he barely knew the man. But death always carried weight, especially for someone who had seen too much of it. I'm sorry to hear that. Your uncle left very specific instructions regarding his estate. Jack leaned back in the chair. What estate? Another brief pause. Mr. Mercer owned a cabin property in western Montana. Jack listened quietly. 62 acres. His eyebrows rose slightly, along with associated holdings and assets. Jack almost laughed. Assets. Nobody had ever used that word in connection with his family. Are you sure you've got the right guy? Mr. Finch chuckled softly. Quite sure. Jack stared out the library window. Traffic moved along the street. Ordinary people heading toward ordinary lives. Meanwhile, his entire future had just shifted slightly off its axis. What exactly are we talking about? Your uncle's primary residence is a log cabin located near the Bitterroot Range, approximately 70 miles southwest of Missoula. Jack knew almost nothing about Montana. Only mountains, snow, forests, distance. Why me? The question slipped out before he could stop it. The attorney was quiet for several seconds. Then he answered carefully. Your uncle was very specific. Specific how? He wanted everything transferred to you and nobody else. Jack frowned. What about the rest of the family? The will was quite clear. The answer landed heavily. Jack knew exactly how the family would react. Not well. His relatives rarely called, rarely visited, rarely cared. But inheritance had a way of bringing people back to life, even people who should have stayed buried. When do I need to come out there? As soon as possible. Mr. Finch's tone softened. Mr. Mercer also left travel funds. Jack blinked. What? We have a cashier's check waiting for you. For a moment he couldn't speak. Nobody had helped him in years. Nobody. Not after the PTSD. Not after the divorce. Not after the job losses. Not after the truck became home. Yet somehow a man he barely knew had planned for him. The feeling was unfamiliar. almost uncomfortable, like hope. By the time the call ended, Jack sat staring at the blank computer screen. Rex walked over and nudged his hand. Jack scratched behind the dog's ears. "You hear that?" Rex tilted his head. "We might be going to Montana." The dog's tail moved once, slowly, as if approving the idea. Outside the library, the clouds had begun to break apart. Sunlight spilled across the city. The world looked brighter than it had that morning. Not transformed, not fixed, just slightly different. And sometimes that was enough. The first person Jack called was his cousin Brent Mercer. The decision would prove to be a mistake. Brent answered immediately. "Jack?" His tone carried surprise, almost suspicion. They hadn't spoken in nearly a year. "Hey, everything okay?" The question sounded forced, like an obligation. Jack leaned against the truck. "Walter Mercer passed away." Silence. Then, "Uncle Walter?" "Yeah." Another pause. "What happened?" "Natural causes, I think." The conversation felt awkward. Two relatives pretending they knew each other. "Why are you calling me?" Jack should have ended the conversation there. Instead, he told him about the lawyer, about the inheritance, about the cabin. The silence that followed was completely different. Longer, sharper, dangerous. When Brent finally spoke, his voice had changed. "Oh." Jack immediately recognized the shift. Interest, calculation, greed. "So Walter left you the property?" "That's what the lawyer says." Brent laughed softly. Not kindly. "You sure about that?" "What do you mean?" "Jack, you've been living out of a truck." There it was, the judgment, the thing everyone eventually said. "You really think Walter wanted you managing land?" Jack felt his jaw tighten. "I'm just telling you what I was told." Sounds like somebody made a mistake. The conversation ended shortly afterward, but the damage remained. As Jack climbed back into the pickup, a familiar heaviness settled inside his chest. The inheritance had barely existed for an hour. Already someone wanted it. Rex climbed into the passenger seat. The German Shepherd rested his head on the center console, watching him, listening, present. Jack smiled faintly. "Guess we should have expected that." The dog blinked. Outside, clouds drifted over the city, far beyond them, far beyond Washington, beyond Idaho, beyond endless miles of highway. The mountains of Montana waited. A forgotten cabin waited. And somewhere inside that wilderness, a dead veteran had left behind a mystery that was only beginning to unfold. Jack started the engine. For the first time in years, he wasn't driving aimlessly. He had a destination. He had a reason to move forward. And though he couldn't explain why, he had the strange feeling that Walter Mercer had been expecting him all along. As the pickup rolled toward the highway, Rex sat taller in the passenger seat, watching the road ahead, watching the future. And neither of them noticed that somewhere in Montana, hidden beneath stone and timber and decades of silence, a secret worth $265 million was still waiting to be discovered. The highway stretched east beneath a pale winter sky. Jack drove with one hand on the wheel while Rex occupied the passenger seat, like a seasoned road warrior. The German Shepherd sat upright, ears occasionally twitching at sounds only he could hear. They crossed the Idaho border just after noon. Snow dusted the distant mountains. The landscape opened into wide valleys and evergreen forests that seemed to roll endlessly toward the horizon. For most people, it would have been a beautiful drive. For Jack, it felt unfamiliar. Not because of the scenery, because he was moving toward something instead of away from it. For years, Every mile had been about survival, finding work, finding shelter, finding another place to spend the night. Now he had a destination. The thought felt strange, dangerously hopeful. His phone rang. The screen displayed a familiar name. Brent Mercer. Jack sighed. That didn't take long. Rex glanced toward him. Jack answered. Hello? Brent skipped the greeting. I talked to Denise. Jack kept driving. Okay. You didn't tell me the lawyer said you're the sole beneficiary. There it was. The real reason for the call. Not concern, not family. Money. I only found out yesterday. You should have called everyone. Jack laughed softly. The sound carried no humor. Everyone? You know what I mean. Actually, Jack didn't. Because everyone hadn't existed when he needed them. Not after the divorce. Not after losing his apartment. Not after sleeping in his truck. Those years had been remarkably quiet. Funny how family suddenly remembered your number when property appeared. Brent continued. Look, Denise and I have been talking. Jack immediately disliked where the conversation was heading. And? You're not exactly in a position to manage real estate. The words landed exactly as Brent intended. A reminder. A judgment. A dismissal. Jack felt his jaw tighten. I'll manage. You've been homeless for 3 years. The accusation hung in the air. Jack stared through the windshield. Snow-covered hills rolled by. His pulse quickened. Not from shame. From anger. You got a point, Brent? My point is that Uncle Walter's property should probably be sold. There it is. What? The real conversation. Brent's voice hardened. I'm being practical. No. You're being interested. Silence. Then Brent exhaled sharply. You always think everyone's against you. Jack almost missed his exit. Not because the words hurt, because they sounded so familiar. The same excuse, the same manipulation, the same refusal to acknowledge reality. Against him? No. Absent. There was a difference. You remember when I called after losing my apartment? Brent didn't answer. You remember that? More silence. Jack continued. I remember. His voice remained calm. That somehow made it sharper. I remember sleeping in a motel parking lot. Nothing. I remember asking for help. Still nothing. I remember nobody answering. The silence became uncomfortable. Brent finally cleared his throat. That was different. Jack smiled bitterly. Sure it was. The call ended minutes later. Neither man felt better. Jack tossed the phone onto the dashboard. Rex leaned across the center console and rested his head against Jack's arm. The simple gesture broke the tension immediately. Jack scratched the dog's neck. At least somebody's got my back. Rex's tail thumped once. The answer was enough. By evening, they reached a small town outside Coeur d'Alene. A diner sat beside a gas station near the interstate. The kind of place where truckers stopped. The kind of place that smelled like coffee and wood smoke. Jack parked and stepped inside. The warmth hit him immediately. A fire crackled inside a stone hearth. Older couples occupied several booths. A group of hunters sat near the window discussing elk season. Normal people, living normal lives. Jack ordered coffee. Rex settled beside the table. Within minutes, a little girl approached carefully, perhaps 8 years old. She looked at Rex with wide eyes. Can I pet him? Jack smiled. If he says yes. The girl looked confused. Rex gently lowered his head. His tail wagged. Permission granted. The girl laughed as she scratched behind his ears. He's beautiful. He knows. The girl's father laughed from a nearby booth. For a few minutes, the world felt unexpectedly kind. The little girl eventually returned to her family. The diner grew quieter. Outside, snow began drifting from the dark sky. Jack watched it fall through the window, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine something dangerous. A future. A cabin. A place that belonged to him. Maybe a workshop, maybe a porch, maybe peace. The idea felt almost impossible. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Denise. He ignored it. Then it rang again. Ignored. Again. Ignored. Finally, a text appeared. Call us back. We need to discuss the property. Jack stared at the screen, then locked the phone. Not tonight. The snowstorm intensified after dark. Jack decided to spend the night in a motel. His first real bed in months. The room wasn't fancy, just clean, warm, safe. Rex immediately inspected every corner before lying near the door. Old habits. Jack sat on the edge of the bed. The silence felt strange, almost uncomfortable. His eyes drifted toward the window. Snow swirled beneath the streetlights. The scene reminded him of another winter years earlier. Afghanistan, mountain operations, night patrols. The memory arrived without warning. Cold air, heavy gear, radio chatter, the sound of rotor blades. Then chaos, gunfire, screaming, the explosion. Jack's breathing changed instantly. The room seemed smaller, the walls closer, the memory stronger. His chest tightened. Not again. Not tonight. Before the panic could take hold, Rex stood. The German shepherd crossed the room and pressed against his leg, grounding him, anchoring him, pulling him back. Jack buried his hand in the dog's thick fur. Slow breaths, one at a time. The panic retreated, like a wave pulling away from shore. Eventually the room returned. The motel returned. Reality returned. Jack looked down. Rex never moved, never left, never judged. Just stayed. The way real family should. Good boy. Rex blinked. Jack smiled. Then he reached for his phone. Curiosity finally winning. He opened a message Denise had sent. Attached was a group text. Participants. Brent, Denise, Travis. Several other relatives. The conversation stretched across dozens of messages. Most discussed one thing. The inheritance. How much the land might be worth. Whether Walter had hidden money. Whether the will could be challenged. Whether Jack was mentally stable enough to inherit anything. Jack scrolled silently. Message after message. Theory after theory. Some relatives he hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions. One message stopped him cold. Travis had written a judge would never leave millions with a homeless guy suffering from PTSD. Several family members had reacted positively. Jack stared at the screen. Something inside him hardened. Not anger. Not exactly. Clarity. The inheritance wasn't even finalized yet. They hadn't seen the property, didn't know its value, had no idea what Walter left behind. And already they were planning, calculating, positioning themselves, like wolves circling something wounded. Jack slowly set the phone aside. Outside, snow continued falling. Inside, Rex rested his head on Jack's knee. The warmth of the dog's presence steadied him. Somewhere in Montana, Walter Mercer had chosen him. Not Brent, not Travis, not Denise. Him. For reasons Jack still didn't understand. But tonight, for the first time, he suspected Walter might have known exactly what kind of people the rest of the family truly were. And if Walter had known, then maybe the old veteran had left behind more than a cabin. Maybe he had left behind a reason. A reason why Jack was the only name written in that will. A reason hidden somewhere deep within the mountains, waiting patiently beneath decades of silence, waiting for a man and a dog to find it. The storm had moved east by morning. Fresh snow blanketed the mountains like a clean sheet spread across the world. Jack stepped outside the motel and breathed in the cold air. The sky was bright blue, the kind of winter sky that seemed almost too perfect to be real. Rex stood beside him, nose lifted into the wind. The German shepherd seemed energized by the snow. His ears remained alert. His eyes followed everything. Always working. Always aware. Jack loaded their few belongings into the pickup. The journey was entering its final stage. Montana. The Bitterroot Mountains. Walter's cabin. For 3 years, every road had led nowhere. Today felt different. The farther east they traveled, the more dramatic the landscape became. Mountains rose higher. Forests grew thicker. Civilization seemed to retreat behind them. By early afternoon, they crossed into Montana. Jack slowed the truck slightly. The sign welcomed them in simple white letters. Montana Big Sky Country. Rex stared through the windshield. Jack laughed quietly. "Looks like we're here, partner." The dog thumped his tail against the seat. For the next several hours, they followed winding highways through valleys framed by towering peaks. Snow-covered ridges stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Frozen rivers cut silver paths through the wilderness. Small ranches appeared occasionally between forests of pine and fir. The scenery felt untouched, ancient, peaceful. Something inside Jack began to relax. Not completely. The PTSD never disappeared entirely, but the endless noise inside his head seemed quieter here, like the mountains absorbed some of the burden. Just before sunset, they reached Helena. The city sat beneath snow-capped mountains glowing gold in the fading light. Jack found the law office exactly where Harold Finch said it would be. A brick building stood on a quiet downtown street. Warm lights glowed through its windows. Rex followed him inside. The receptionist smiled immediately. "You must be Mr. Mercer." Jack nodded. The woman looked down at Rex. "And this must be Rex." The dog's tail wagged politely. Harold Finch emerged moments later. He was in his late 60s with silver hair and the weathered face of a man who spent time outdoors. His handshake was firm, his eyes kind. "Jack Mercer." "Mr. Finch." The attorney looked toward Rex. "Your uncle mentioned the possibility of a dog." Jack frowned. "What do you mean?" Finch smiled. "We'll get to that." The comment lingered in Jack's mind as they moved into the office. Stacks of paperwork covered a large oak desk. Maps hung on the walls. Several photographs showed mountain landscapes. The attorney spent nearly an hour explaining legal details. Property transfer forms, ownership documents, tax information. Jack listened carefully. Much of it felt overwhelming. Eventually, Finch opened a drawer and removed a brass key. The metal looked old, worn smooth by decades of use. "This belongs to you now." Jack stared at it. The key seemed heavier than it should, as though it carried history, responsibility, possibility. Finch placed a folded map beside it. "The cabin is here." Jack studied the location. The property sat deep within the Bitterroot region, far from major roads, far from towns, far from almost everything. Did Walter really live there alone? Finch nodded. "Nearly 40 years. Why?" The attorney smiled faintly. "Because that's where he wanted to be." They left Helena shortly afterward. Finch insisted on guiding them personally. The roads became narrower as they traveled south. Civilization slowly disappeared. Gas stations vanished. Cell service faded. The mountains grew larger, darker, more impressive. The truck climbed steadily through snow-covered forests. Pines towered over the road like silent guardians. The late afternoon sun painted everything gold. It felt less like driving and more like entering another world. Eventually, they turned onto a gravel road, then a dirt road, then something barely recognizable as a road at all. Jack glanced at Finch. "You came out here often?" "Every few months." "Why?" The old attorney smiled. "Walter made me promise." The answer raised more questions than it solved. An hour later, the forest suddenly opened. Jack slowed the truck, then stopped completely. For several seconds, he simply stared. The cabin stood at the center of a snowy clearing, 2 stories tall, built from massive hand-cut logs. A stone chimney rose from the center of the roof. Smoke no longer drifted from it. Yet the structure looked solid, strong, timeless. Behind it stretched a frozen lake reflecting the mountains beyond. Towering pines surrounded everything. The setting looked like something from a painting. Jack couldn't speak. He had expected a shack, a ruin, something barely standing. Instead, he found a home, a real home, for the first time in years. Rex jumped from the truck immediately. His paws crunched through fresh snow. The dog stopped halfway to the cabin. Then something strange happened. He froze, completely still. His ears stood forward. His eyes locked onto the building. Jack noticed instantly. Rex wasn't excited. He wasn't curious. He looked focused, almost cautious. "What is it, buddy?" The dog didn't move. Finch watched quietly. "You see that?" Jack nodded. "Yeah. Interesting." The attorney's expression suggested he found nothing surprising about it. That bothered Jack slightly. Rex finally continued forward, but his attention never left the cabin. Not once. They approached together. The front porch wrapped around 3 sides of the structure. Snow rested along the railings. Hand-carved designs decorated the support beams. The craftsmanship was remarkable. Whoever built this place cared deeply about every detail. Jack inserted the brass key. The lock turned smoothly. The front door opened. Warmth didn't greet them. The cabin had been empty for months, yet something else lingered inside. A feeling, a presence, history. The interior exceeded every expectation. Exposed beams crossed the high ceiling. A massive stone fireplace dominated the main room. Bookshelves lined entire walls. Handmade furniture stood exactly where Walter had left it. Nothing appeared neglected. Nothing appeared forgotten. The cabin felt paused rather than abandoned, like its owner had simply stepped outside. Jack slowly walked through the rooms. Kitchen, workshop, storage areas, guest bedroom. Everything remained organized with military precision. Finch smiled. Walter hated clutter. Jack laughed. "Sounds familiar." Then he noticed Rex again. The German Shepherd wasn't exploring, wasn't sniffing furniture, wasn't checking rooms. Instead, he stood near the stone fireplace, watching it, motionless. The behavior felt odd, very odd. "Rex." The dog glanced briefly toward him, then looked back at the fireplace. Finch quietly observed. "Interesting." Again. That word. Interesting. Jack looked at him. "What aren't you telling me?" The attorney smiled. "Nothing." The answer came too quickly. Jack wasn't convinced. After a final tour, Finch prepared to leave. The sun had almost disappeared behind the mountains. Long shadows stretched across the snow-covered clearing. The temperature was dropping rapidly. If you need supplies, the nearest town is Cedar Ridge. Jack nodded. I appreciate everything. Finch handed him a final envelope. Your uncle wanted you to have this after you arrived. Jack stared at the envelope. Walter's handwriting covered the front. Simple. Direct. For Jack. His pulse quickened. What's inside? Finch smiled. I honestly don't know. Then the old attorney climbed into his truck and drove away. The sound of the engine gradually disappeared into the forest. Silence settled over the clearing. Real silence. Not city silence. Not suburban silence. Wilderness silence. The kind that felt alive. Jack stood on the porch holding the envelope. Snow drifted gently from the trees. The mountains glowed beneath the final light of sunset. Rex remained inside, near the fireplace, watching, waiting, as though something beneath those ancient stones had captured every ounce of his attention. Jack finally entered the cabin. The firewood Walter left beside the hearth allowed him to build a small fire. Flames slowly came alive. Warm orange light filled the room. The cabin immediately felt different, welcoming, comfortable. Home. Jack sat in an old leather chair and opened the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten note. The paper had yellowed slightly with age. Walter's writing remained steady and precise. Jack, if you're reading this, then you made it. Good. Some roads are worth traveling. Trust your instincts. Trust your dog. And pay attention to what he notices. He sees things most people miss. Welcome home. Walter Jack read the note twice, then a third time. Trust your dog. The words felt strangely specific. His eyes slowly lifted toward Rex. The German shepherd remained exactly where he had been for nearly an hour, beside the fireplace, watching the stones, watching something invisible. The fire crackled softly. Outside, darkness settled over the mountains, and deep beneath the cabin floor, hidden beneath decades of silence, a secret waited patiently. For a dog who refused to look away, and for a man who was finally beginning to wonder why. The first morning at the cabin arrived wrapped in silence. No traffic, no distant sirens, no truck stop engines rumbling through the night. Only the whisper of wind moving through the pines. Jack opened his eyes slowly. For a moment he didn't recognize the room. The wooden ceiling, the stone walls, the sunlight spilling across the floor. Then he remembered. Montana. Walter's cabin, home. The words still felt strange. Rex was already awake. The German shepherd stood near the fireplace, exactly where he had been when Jack fell asleep. The dog hadn't moved. Jack sat up. You stayed there all night? Rex looked over his shoulder. His tail wagged once. Then his attention immediately returned to the stone hearth. Jack frowned. The behavior wasn't normal. Not for Rex. Working dogs investigated. They searched. They checked. Then they moved on. But this was different. The dog seemed fixated, almost obsessed. Jack rose and walked toward him. The fireplace dominated the main room. Massive stones climbed nearly 20 feet toward the ceiling. Years of use had darkened portions of the rock with soot. Everything appeared solid, ordinary, nothing unusual. Yet Rex continued staring. Jack ran his hand across several stones. Cold, rough, ancient, nothing more. You smell a mouse? Rex didn't react. You hear something? Nothing. The dog simply remained focused, watching, waiting. Jack eventually gave up and moved toward the kitchen. The cabin's old wood stove still worked perfectly. Walter had clearly maintained everything with military discipline. Coffee was brewing 20 minutes later. The rich aroma filled the room. For a brief moment, Jack allowed himself to enjoy it. Sunlight filtered through the windows. Snow sparkled outside. The lake reflected the mountains like polished glass. The entire scene felt unreal. 3 days ago, he had been sleeping in a truck. Now he sat in a mountain cabin drinking coffee beside a crackling fire. The contrast was almost impossible to process. By mid-morning, he decided to explore the property. Rex immediately followed. The dog finally left the fireplace. But before stepping outside, he paused, looked back, then continued on. The gesture lasted less than a second. Jack still noticed. The cabin sat on one of the most beautiful pieces of land he had ever seen. The frozen lake stretched behind the clearing. Dense forests surrounded the property. Snow-covered peaks towered beyond everything. The wilderness felt endless and strangely peaceful. For the first time in years, the constant tension in Jack's shoulders began to ease, not disappear, just loosen slightly. He spent the afternoon inspecting buildings. Walter's workshop sat behind the cabin. The place looked like a craftsman's paradise. Tools lined the walls with perfect organization. Every hammer, every wrench, every saw. Everything had its place. A faded American flag hung above a large workbench. Nearby sat framed photographs. Walter as a young soldier. Walter fishing. Walter standing beside the cabin during its construction. Jack studied the images quietly. The old veteran looked serious in every photograph. Strong, reserved, capable. The kind of man who never complained. The kind of man who solved problems himself. A lot like the men Jack had served with. A lot like the man Jack used to be. The thought lingered. Used to be. Rex suddenly barked outside. Once. Sharp. Focused. Jack stepped out of the workshop. The dog stood near the cabin, looking toward the front door, waiting. What now? Rex immediately trotted toward the entrance. Jack followed. The dog walked directly into the main room, past the furniture, past the dining table, straight to the fireplace. Then he sat, staring, again. Jack laughed. You've got to be kidding. The dog remained completely serious. That evening brought another surprise. A pickup truck appeared shortly before sunset. Jack stepped onto the porch. Rex immediately moved beside him, protective, alert. The vehicle stopped near the clearing. An older man climbed out. Tall, weathered, wearing a heavy winter coat. He raised one hand in greeting. Afternoon. Jack nodded cautiously. The man smiled. Name's Earl Thompson. He pointed toward the distant valley. Nearest neighbor. About 3 miles that way. Jack relaxed slightly. Jack Mercer, Earl. The old rancher glanced toward Rex. Beautiful dog. His name's Rex. Earl knelt slightly. Rex studied him for several seconds, then accepted the greeting. A good sign. Figured I'd stop by. Earl handed him a paper bag. Fresh bread. My wife insisted. Jack stared. Nobody had brought him anything in years. The simple kindness caught him off guard. You didn't have to do that. Earl shrugged. Mountain people look after each other. The words landed harder than expected. Mountain people. As if Jack already belonged here. The two men talked for nearly an hour. Earl had known Walter for decades. The stories painted a clearer picture of the old veteran. He wasn't much for crowds. Jack smiled. I noticed. But he watched everything. Earl's eyes drifted toward the cabin. He saw things other people missed. The comment sounded familiar, almost identical to what Harold Finch had said. Jack frowned. What do you mean? Earl thought for a moment. Walter always paid attention. To what? People. The answer came immediately. He could figure out a person's character faster than anybody I ever met. The rancher glanced toward Jack. He thought highly of you. Jack blinked. How? He talked about you. That surprised him. He barely knew me. Earl smiled. You'd be surprised. The conversation ended shortly after dark. As Earl drove away, Jack stood on the porch watching the headlights disappear into the trees. Something felt different. Walter wasn't a mystery anymore. Not entirely. Pieces of him existed everywhere. In the workshop, in the photographs, in the stories, in the cabin itself. The old man seemed present despite being gone. That night, a storm moved across the mountains. Wind rattled the windows. Snow struck the roof. The forest groaned beneath powerful gusts. Jack sat beside the fire reading one of Walter's journals. Mostly weather notes, fishing records, observations about wildlife. Simple things. Yet even the simplest entries revealed discipline, patience, attention. Around midnight, he noticed something. Rex wasn't sleeping. The dog stood beside the fireplace again, watching, always watching. Jack finally walked over. The behavior had continued for nearly 2 full days. Something was happening. Something Rex refused to ignore. He crouched beside the dog. What is it, buddy? Rex immediately pawed at one of the lower stones. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Then he looked at Jack. Back to the stone. Back to Jack. The message felt deliberate. Jack studied the rock carefully. Nothing appeared unusual. No gaps, no openings, no hidden handles, just stone. Yet Rex continued scratching. The dog had located hidden explosives overseas, detected enemies before entire patrols noticed danger, saved lives repeatedly. Jack trusted him more than most humans. Walter's note surfaced in his memory. Trust your dog, and pay attention to what he notices. The words suddenly felt heavier, more important. The wind howled outside. The fire crackled. The cabin settled with soft creaks. Jack slowly placed his hand against the stone. Cold, solid, ordinary. Yet something deep inside him whispered that it wasn't ordinary at all. Rex pawed it again, harder this time, then sat back, waiting, almost impatient. Jack stared at the fireplace. The mystery that had followed them from the moment they arrived seemed to be growing. And for the first time, he found himself asking a question he couldn't answer. What exactly had Walter wanted him to find? Outside, snow continued falling across the mountains. Inside, a retired military dog refused to abandon his post, because somewhere behind those ancient stones, hidden beneath decades of silence, something was waiting. And Rex knew it was there. The storm arrived just after dawn. Heavy gray clouds rolled over the Bitterroot Mountains, swallowing the peaks one by one until the world beyond the cabin disappeared entirely. Snow fell hard. Wind howled through the pines. The lake behind the cabin vanished beneath a curtain of white. Jack stood at the front window with a mug of coffee in his hands. The storm reminded him of deployments in remote mountain regions. The same isolation. The same feeling that the outside world had ceased to exist. Only this time there were no radios crackling. No orders. No missions. Only him. And Rex. The German shepherd sat near the fireplace, watching, always watching. Jack glanced over. The dog hadn't stopped. 3 days now. 3 days of staring at the same section of stone. 3 days of scratching. 3 days of returning to the same spot no matter what else happened. even during walks around the property, even during meals, even while sleeping. Rex always came back. The behavior was impossible to ignore. Jack approached the fireplace once again. He crouched beside the stone Rex had chosen. The rock looked no different from the others. No markings, no seams, no visible mechanism. Yet the dog insisted. "Okay," Jack said quietly. "What am I missing?" Rex immediately stood, tail wagging, not excited, focused. The same expression he used before locating explosives overseas. The same expression he used before detecting danger. Jack felt a strange chill. Walter's note echoed in his mind. Trust your dog, and pay attention to what he notices. The wind slammed against the cabin. The fire crackled behind him. Rex suddenly pawed the stone again. Hard. This time something sounded different. Not loud. Barely noticeable. A faint click. Jack froze. Rex heard it too. The dog's ears snapped forward. Both of them stared at the fireplace. The cabin fell silent except for the storm outside. Jack slowly pressed against the stone. Nothing happened. He pressed harder. Still nothing. Then he noticed something. One corner shifted. Barely. Almost imperceptibly. His pulse quickened. The stone moved. Not much. But enough. Jack grabbed a flashlight from the nearby table, then returned to the fireplace. Rex stood beside him, waiting, watching. The former SEAL carefully examined the stonework. His training had taught him to look for patterns, hidden compartments, concealed access points, the things most people overlooked. Finally, he found it. A small depression concealed between two stones, almost invisible. Jack inserted his fingers and pulled. At first, nothing happened. Then the mechanism engaged. A low grinding sound echoed through the cabin. Ancient, heavy, powerful. Stone moved against stone. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The floor directly in front of the fireplace shifted. Jack jumped backward instinctively. Rex remained planted, focused, prepared. The square section of floor slowly separated from the surrounding stone. A narrow opening appeared, then widened, then revealed darkness beneath. Jack stared. His heart pounded. A hidden chamber. No. More than that. A staircase. Ancient stone steps descended into blackness below the cabin. The storm outside seemed to disappear. The entire world narrowed to the opening beneath his feet. For several seconds, neither man nor dog moved. Then Jack laughed softly. Not because anything was funny, because he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Rex." The dog looked up. "You found it." The German shepherd wagged his tail once, as if the discovery had been inevitable. Jack grabbed additional supplies, flashlights, batteries, a heavy jacket. Military habits resurfaced automatically. Never enter the unknown unprepared. When he returned, Rex was already standing at the top of the stairs, waiting. The beam from Jack's flashlight cut through the darkness. The staircase descended deep beneath the cabin, far deeper than he expected. The walls appeared carved directly from bedrock. Whoever built this had invested enormous effort. Walter had created something extraordinary. But why? Jack took the first step. The air below felt different, cooler, still, preserved. Rex moved beside him, never more than a few feet away. The staircase seemed endless, 10 steps, 20, 30. The deeper they descended, the quieter the storm became, until only silence remained. Finally, the stairs ended. Jack swept the flashlight across the darkness and stopped breathing. A chamber emerged from the shadows. Massive, much larger than the cabin above. Stone walls stretched outward in every direction. Heavy timber beams supported the ceiling. Shelves lined entire sections of the room. Crates sat stacked with military precision. Metal cabinets stood against the walls. Everything remained organized. Everything remained untouched. It looked as though Walter had walked out yesterday. Not months ago, not years ago. Decades. Jack moved forward slowly. The beam of his flashlight revealed labels on the crates. Dates, inventory numbers, handwritten notes. Everything meticulously documented. The old veteran had planned this place carefully. Very carefully. Rex moved ahead. His nose worked constantly. Yet unlike before, he seemed calm, satisfied. The mystery that had obsessed him for days was no longer hidden. He had found it. Jack approached the nearest shelf. Rows of leather-bound journals filled the space. Dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, each labeled by year, each preserved perfectly. Nearby stood several military footlockers. Their metal surfaces showed age but little damage. Against another wall sat locked wooden crates, large ones, heavy ones. Whatever rested inside had remained hidden for decades. The scale of the discovery left Jack speechless. This wasn't a storage room. This wasn't a survival shelter. This was something else entirely. A secret. One built over many years. One protected with incredible care. His flashlight beam eventually settled on a large oak desk positioned near the center of the chamber. A single journal rested there, unlike the others. Open. Waiting. As though someone expected him to arrive. Jack approached cautiously. The pages had yellowed with age, yet the handwriting remained perfectly clear. Walter's handwriting. The first page contained only a single sentence. "Welcome, Jack. If you are reading this," then Rex succeeded. Jack stared. The words sent a chill through him. Rex succeeded. Walter knew. Somehow, Walter had anticipated exactly how this discovery would happen. Jack slowly looked toward the dog. Rex sat calmly nearby, watching him, watching the room, watching history unfold. Outside, the storm raged across the mountains. Inside, deep beneath the cabin, a dead veteran's first message waited on an open paw. And it carried a promise. Because Jack could already tell this hidden chamber contained far more than old journals and forgotten crates. Something much larger was buried here. Something valuable. Something important. Something Walter had spent a lifetime protecting. And for the first time, Jack realized that inheriting the cabin had never been the true gift. The cabin had only been the doorway. The real inheritance was waiting below. Hidden beneath stone, hidden beneath time, hidden until a loyal dog finally uncovered the path. And Jack Mercer was only beginning to understand what Walter Mercer had left behind. The underground chamber felt untouched by time. The storm continued raging somewhere above, but down here, the world was silent. Still, preserved. Jack stood beside the massive oak desk, staring at the open journal. "Welcome, Jack. If you are reading this, then Rex succeeded." The words lingered in his mind. Not because they were mysterious, because they were personal. Walter had known. Not guessed. Known. The old veteran had somehow anticipated that a dog would be standing beside Jack when this room was discovered. Jack looked across the chamber. Rex sat calmly near the entrance. The German shepherd appeared completely at ease now. The anxiety that had consumed him for days was gone. His mission was complete. He had found what Walter wanted found. Now it was Jack's turn to understand why. He opened the journal. Walter's handwriting filled every page. Precise, organized, military. The first entries explained the construction of the chamber. Years of labor, thousands of hours, stone hauled by hand, timber cut from the surrounding forest. Walter had built almost everything himself. Page after page documented decades of work. But then the entries changed. The records became inventories, detailed lists, descriptions, values, locations. Jack frowned. His flashlight moved closer. One entry read, 1887 Winchester rifle. Excellent condition. Acquired 1974. Estimated value, $14,000. Another. Original Civil War officer's saber. Verified authenticity. Estimated value, $9,500. The numbers continued. Thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Jack slowly closed the journal. His pulse had begun to rise. Something important was happening. Something far bigger than old collectibles. He approached one of the nearby wooden crates. A pry bar rested against the wall, waiting, almost inviting him. Jack hesitated, then slid the metal tool beneath the lid. The nails groaned, wood creaked. The crate slowly opened. Inside lay a painting wrapped in protective cloth. Jack carefully unfolded the material. His breath caught. The artwork was beautiful. Mountain peaks beneath a dramatic sunset. The brushwork looked extraordinary. A brass plate attached to the frame identified the artist. Even Jack recognized the name. The piece alone looked valuable, very valuable. His eyes drifted toward Walter's inventory records. The matching entry sat only 2 pages away. Estimated value, $1.3 million. Jack stared, then looked back at the painting, then back at the journal. $1 million for a single painting. The room suddenly felt different, larger, heavier, more significant. Rex watched quietly. The dog seemed content to let the human finally catch up. Jack moved to another crate, then another, then another. Each contained something remarkable. Rare artwork, historical artifacts, collectibles preserved in museum-quality condition. Everything cataloged meticulously, everything documented, everything protected. Hours passed. The storm outside continued. Jack barely noticed. The deeper he explored, the more impossible the discovery became. One cabinet contained rare coins, another held gold bars, actual gold bars, carefully stacked and inventoried, each marked with dates and estimated values. Nearby shelves held first-edition books, ancient maps, historical documents, military memorabilia. The collection seemed endless. Walter hadn't simply hidden valuables. He had built a lifetime's worth of wealth, piece by piece, year by year, decade by decade. Jack sat heavily in a chair. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. The man who lived quietly in a mountain cabin had secretly become one of the wealthiest individuals Jack had ever heard of. And nobody knew. Nobody. The realization felt almost surreal. Rex approached and rested his head against Jack's leg. The familiar gesture grounded him, the same way it always had. Jack scratched behind the dog's ears. "I think your friend Walter was full of surprises." Rex's tail moved gently, as if agreeing. The largest discovery waited until late afternoon. At the far end of the chamber stood a locked steel cabinet. Unlike the others, this one appeared newer, more secure. A small key rested inside the journal's back cover. Walter had left it intentionally. Jack inserted the key. The lock clicked open. Inside sat several thick binders, financial records, investment portfolios, stock certificates, bank statements. The numbers made no sense at first. Too many zeros, too many pages, too much information. He spent nearly an hour reviewing them. Then the truth slowly emerged. Walter had invested for decades. Technology companies, energy firms, manufacturing corporations. Some investments stretched back 40 years. The returns were staggering. Jack eventually found the final summary. A single page, neatly typed, professionally organized. Final estate assessment. He read the first category. Rare art collection. Estimated value, $87 million. Jack blinked, then continued. Precious metals and historical assets. Estimated value, $61 million. Investment holdings. Estimated value, $102 million. Additional property and miscellaneous assets. Estimated value, $15 million. His eyes reached the bottom. Total estimated estate value, $265 million. The chamber seemed to fall silent. Even his breathing stopped. $265 million. The number felt unreal, absurd, impossible. Jack read it again. Then again. The total never changed. For years he had worried about buying coffee, worried about gasoline, worried about sleeping somewhere safe. Now he sat beneath a mountain reading a document that suggested he had inherited more money than he could comprehend. The shock wasn't excitement. Not immediately. It was disbelief. Pure disbelief. Because people like him weren't supposed to stumble into fortunes. People like him struggled, survived, adapted. They didn't inherit hundreds of millions of dollars. Rex pressed closer. The dog sensed something. Not the money, the emotion, the overwhelming confusion. Jack rested a hand on the dog's shoulder. Slowly, steadily. Then he noticed something else inside the cabinet. A bundle of envelopes, bound together with a leather strap. The handwriting on the front immediately caught his attention. For Jack Mercer. Personal. Private. Walter's letters. Dozens of them. Jack carefully untied the strap. The first envelope appeared older than the rest. He opened it slowly. Inside sat several pages. The opening sentence hit harder than any financial document ever could. Jack. By now you've discovered what I've spent most of my life building. But if that's all you see, then you've missed the important part. Jack stared, then continued reading. Walter wrote about service, duty, responsibility, sacrifice. The words felt familiar, like advice from an older soldier speaking to a younger one. Then the letter became personal, very personal. Walter described events from Jack's life, his military service, his deployments, his divorce, even his homelessness. Jack's hands froze. The old veteran knew. He knew everything. The realization sent a chill through him. Walter had been watching, not in a sinister way, not obsessively, but carefully. From a distance. The way family should. The way family rarely did. Tears unexpectedly stung Jack's eyes. He blinked them away. Walter continued, I watched what happened after your service. I watched people disappear when things became difficult. I watched others judge you without understanding what you carried. I watched you survive anyway. Jack swallowed hard. The room blurred briefly. Not because of the money, because somebody had seen him, really seen him. For years he had felt invisible, dismissed, forgotten. Yet somewhere in these mountains, an old veteran had been paying attention. Walter had noticed. Walter had understood. And Walter had decided Jack was worth believing in. The realization carried more weight than $265 million ever could. Rex rested his head in Jack's lap. The German shepherd looked up calmly, steadily, loyal as ever. Jack smiled through the emotion. "Looks like we found more than a vault, buddy." Outside, the storm slowly began to fade. Inside, deep beneath the cabin, a broken veteran sat beside the dog who had led him there, surrounded by unimaginable wealth, holding a letter from a man who had quietly watched over him for years. And for the first time in a very long time, Jack Mercer no longer felt invisible. But Walter's letters were only beginning, and hidden within the remaining pages waited an even greater revelation. One that would explain why Jack had been chosen, and why danger was already moving toward the cabin. The storm finally passed during the night. By morning, sunlight poured across the mountains. Fresh snow covered the forest like a blanket of diamonds. The world outside looked peaceful, untouched. But deep beneath the cabin, Jack Mercer was reading words that changed everything. Rex lay beside him near the oak desk. The German shepherd had refused to leave the underground chamber, almost as if he understood the importance of what was happening. Jack opened the second letter. Walter's handwriting remained steady, strong, confident. The writing belonged to a man completely certain of his decisions. "Jack, if you are reading this letter, then you've already discovered the collection. You've probably also discovered the financial records, and you're likely wondering why I chose you. The answer is simple. I chose character, not blood." Jack leaned back in the chair. The words struck immediately. Walter continued. "For years I watched our family, not closely, not obsessively, simply enough to understand who people really were. Most people reveal themselves when nobody thinks they're being observed. Your cousins certainly did." Jack turned the page. The next section felt less like a letter and more like a confession. Walter described family reunions, funerals, holiday gatherings, small conversations, the things people said when they thought nobody important was listening. Walter documented everything. Brent Mercer, Denise Mercer, Travis Mercer. The names appeared repeatedly, alongside stories of greed, manipulation, arguments over money, broken promises. Walter had been paying attention for decades. Then Jack reached a passage that made his chest tighten. "I watched what happened after your father died. I watched your relatives circle the estate before the funeral flowers were gone. I watched them talk about money while pretending to discuss grief. I watched them promise things they never intended to deliver." The words felt painfully accurate. Jack remembered every moment. The empty promises, the disappearing phone calls, the sudden silence when he needed help most. Walter had seen it all, and he had remembered. Rex lifted his head. The dog sensed Jack's emotions shifting. Jack scratched behind his ears, then continued reading. "I also watched you. You don't know this. But several times I asked people about you. Old military friends, former neighbors, a retired commander who served with you. What I heard never changed. You kept your word, even when it cost you. You helped people who could never repay you. You carried burdens that weren't yours because you believed loyalty mattered. That matters to me, more than wealth ever could." Jack swallowed hard. The room felt strangely warm despite the cool underground air. For years he had measured himself through failure. The failed marriage, the PTSD, the homelessness, the endless struggle. Walter seemed to see something else entirely. The things Jack had survived. The things he had endured. The things he never quit. Another envelope sat beneath the first. Jack opened it. This letter was shorter, more direct, and somehow even more powerful. If you are reading this, then eventually the others will learn what you've inherited. When that happens, pay attention. They will not come because they care about you. They will come because they care about what you possess. There is a difference. Jack froze. His eyes moved across the page. The old veteran had predicted everything, every single thing. They will tell you they are family. They will say they are concerned. They will question your judgment, your health, your ability to manage wealth. Some may even claim they are trying to help. Do not mistake greed for concern. Jack slowly lowered the letter. Silence filled the chamber. Only the distant creaking of the cabin above interrupted the stillness. Walter had seen the future. Not literally, but he understood people, and he understood his family. A realization began forming. Walter hadn't simply left money behind. He had built defenses, protections, warnings. The entire vault suddenly felt different. Every journal, every document, every inventory record, everything had been designed to survive challenges, legal challenges, family challenges, human nature itself. Jack opened another journal. This one contained observations spanning nearly 20 years. Dates, conversations, events, patterns. Walter had documented behavior with the precision of an intelligence analyst. The old veteran wasn't paranoid. He was prepared. Very prepared. The deeper Jack read, the more unsettling the entries became. Walter predicted Brent's reactions repeatedly, predicted Travis's anger, predicted Denise's attempts to influence situations behind the scenes. The accuracy was remarkable, almost uncomfortable. Rex suddenly stood, his ears lifted. Jack immediately noticed. Military instincts activated automatically. The dog wasn't alarmed, just alert. Listening. Jack listened too. Nothing. Only silence. Eventually Rex relaxed, but the moment lingered. A reminder that the world above still existed, and the world above could change quickly. Hours passed. Jack continued reading. Near the bottom of one journal, he discovered a final note written only 6 months before Walter's death. The handwriting appeared slightly shakier, yet the message remained crystal clear. If events unfold as I expect, then eventually there will be conflict. Do not fear it. Truth has a habit of surviving. Prepare yourself. Prepare Rex, and remember this. A person's greatest asset is not wealth. It is integrity. Jack stared at the sentence, then looked around the chamber. $265 million surrounded him, yet Walter kept returning to the same subject. Character, integrity, loyalty. Not money, not power, not possessions. The old veteran cared far more about who inherited the fortune than the fortune itself. The realization brought unexpected comfort, because Jack understood that way of thinking. The military taught the same lesson. Equipment mattered. Training mattered. Money mattered. But character mattered most. The wrong person could destroy everything. The right person could build something meaningful. Late that afternoon, Jack finally climbed the stairs back into the cabin. Rex followed closely behind. The hidden passage sealed behind them with a low rumble. The secret disappeared once more. For a moment, the cabin felt normal again. Simple, quiet, peaceful. But Jack knew better now. Nothing about this place was ordinary. He stepped onto the porch, The storm had left the mountains sparkling beneath the setting sun. The lake reflected orange and gold light. Pine trees stood motionless in the cold air. Everything looked perfect. Yet something inside him felt unsettled. Walter's warnings echoed repeatedly. They will come. Not because they care about you, because they care about what you possess. The words refused to leave. As darkness approached, Jack noticed movement near the end of the property road. A vehicle, far away, almost hidden by trees. His eyes narrowed. The truck remained there only briefly, then disappeared. Perhaps a passing vehicle, perhaps a hunter, perhaps nothing at all. Still, the sight bothered him. Rex noticed it too. The German shepherd stood beside Jack, watching the road, silent, focused, the same way he watched the fireplace, the same way he watched for danger. Jack rested one hand on the dog's neck. The fur felt warm beneath his fingers, steady, reliable. You think trouble's coming too? Rex remained fixed on the distant road. The sun disappeared behind the mountains. Shadows spread across the valley. And for the first time since arriving in Montana, Jack felt something other than hope. A storm had passed, but another one was beginning. This one wouldn't come from the sky. It would come from people. And somewhere beyond the mountains, news of Walter Mercer's hidden fortune was already beginning to move. Toward the cabin, toward the inheritance, toward Jack, and toward the loyal dog who had uncovered the secret that changed everything. The first sign came 3 days later. Jack was splitting firewood behind the cabin when his phone suddenly vibrated. For a moment he was surprised it worked at all. Cell service in the mountains came and went like the weather. He wiped sweat from his hands and checked the screen. Harold Finch. Jack answered immediately. Mr. Finch. The attorney sounded tired, more tired than usual. Jack, where are you right now? At the cabin. Good. Something in the old lawyer's voice made Jack stop swinging the axe. What happened? A pause. Then Finch sighed. The story leaked. Jack frowned. What story? The inheritance. The words hit harder than expected. Jack looked toward the cabin, toward the hidden chamber beneath it, toward the secret Walter had spent decades protecting. How bad? Worse than I hoped. Finch sounded frustrated. A local reporter found records connected to Walter's estate. Jack already knew what came next. The old attorney continued. The article spread online. Silence, and your family saw it. Of course they did. Jack closed his eyes briefly. The wolves had caught the scent. Brent called me 6 times yesterday. Finch's voice hardened. Then he hired attorneys. Jack laughed once. A short sound, without humor. So it begins. Yes. The attorney didn't sugarcoat it. It begins. That evening, Jack drove into Cedar Ridge for supplies. The small mountain town sat beneath snow-covered ridges and looked like something from another era. Main Street contained a diner, a hardware store, a post office, a grocery market. Simple places. Good places. Normally, nobody paid much attention to newcomers. Today was different. People recognized him. A few nodded politely. Others stared. Some whispered. Jack immediately understood. The article had spread faster than expected. He bought groceries, dog food, fuel, then headed toward the diner. The moment he stepped inside, conversations briefly paused. Not hostile, just curious. Everyone knew. A waitress approached. Middle-aged, friendly. Jack Mercer? Jack nodded. The woman smiled. Coffee's on the house. He blinked. You don't have to do that. She shrugged. Veterans don't pay for coffee here. The simple kindness surprised him. Again. Mountain people. Looking after each other. Jack smiled. Thank you. The woman nodded toward Rex. And his lunch is free too. Rex's ears immediately perked up. The entire diner laughed. For a few minutes, everything felt normal. Then the front door opened. 3 people entered. Jack recognized Brent instantly. His older cousin looked exactly the same. Expensive coat, expensive boots, expensive smile. Behind him came Denise. Then Travis. The sight turned the warm diner cold. Nobody spoke. Even Rex noticed. The German shepherd rose slowly. Not aggressive, protective. Jack remained seated. Brent approached. His smile looked practiced. Artificial, Jack. Jack didn't stand. Brent. A long silence followed. The entire diner watched. Finally, Brent sat across from him without invitation. Denise and Travis remained standing nearby. What are you doing here? Jack already knew the answer. Brent folded his hands. We came to help, there it was. The exact phrase Walter predicted. Help. Jack almost laughed. 3 years late. Brent ignored the comment. We've reviewed the estate situation. The wording sounded corporate. Legal. Prepared. Jack remained silent. Denise finally spoke. You shouldn't be handling this alone. Jack looked at her. Why not? Travis answered before she could. Because it's worth hundreds of millions. There it was. Not concern, not family. Money. Always money. Jack leaned back. So that's why you're here. Brent shook his head. No. Really? Really? The lie hung in the air. Everyone felt it. Brent lowered his voice. Look, Jack. He glanced around the diner. We're worried. Jack stared, then slowly smiled. Worried. Yes. Worried enough to ignore me for 3 years. Nobody answered. The silence became uncomfortable. Jack continued. Worried enough not to call. Nothing. Worried enough not to help. Brent's jaw tightened. The performance was slipping. Jack saw it happen. The concern fading. The irritation emerging. Finally, Brent leaned forward. We're trying to prevent you from making mistakes. There it was. The real conversation. Jack looked directly into his cousin's eyes. What kind of mistakes? Brent exchanged a glance with Denise, then spoke carefully. PTSD changes people. The diner grew even quieter. Jack felt every eye in the room. Travis jumped in. Nobody's saying you're dangerous. The fact that he said it immediately suggested otherwise. We're saying you're vulnerable. Jack nodded slowly. Understanding. Now he understood everything. The inheritance wasn't the target. He was. His homelessness. His PTSD. His past. Those would become weapons. Walter had predicted every word, every move, every excuse. Jack stood. The chair scraped softly against the floor. Rex immediately rose beside him. Brent looked surprised. So we're doing this? Jack asked. Brent frowned. Doing what? The part where you pretend this is about me. Nobody answered. Because nobody could. Jack looked at each of them, one at a time, then shook his head. You should leave. Travis stood abruptly. Don't be stupid. The entire diner stiffened. Jack remained calm. Years of military discipline held his temper in place. You should leave. This time his voice carried steel. Brent rose slowly. His smile was gone now. Only frustration remained. We're family. Jack nodded. That's exactly why this hurts. For a moment, something flickered across Brent's face. Guilt. Maybe. Then it disappeared. The three relatives left without another word. The diner remained silent until the door closed. Then conversations slowly resumed. Jack sat down again. Coffee suddenly tasted bitter. The waitress returned quietly. You okay? Jack looked toward the window. Snow drifted across Main Street. His relatives disappeared into the distance. No. He answered honestly. Not really. That night the mountains felt different. The cabin still stood beautiful beneath the stars. The lake still reflected moonlight. The pines still whispered in the wind. Yet peace had been damaged. Not destroyed. Damaged. The wolves knew where he lived now, and they weren't leaving. 3 days later, another blow arrived. A legal notice, delivered directly to Harold Finch's office. Brent Mercer and several relatives had officially challenged the estate. The claim stated Jack Mercer lacked the mental stability necessary to manage a fortune of that size. PTSD, homelessness, financial hardship, all listed as evidence. Jack read the paperwork twice, then set it down. Walter had predicted this too. Every page, every accusation, every lie. The old veteran seemed to be speaking from beyond the grave. Meanwhile, local reporters began appearing. At first, only one, then two, then more. Questions followed. Camera crews, speculation, curiosity. The secret was no longer secret. The vault existed, the fortune existed, and everybody wanted access. A week later, danger finally reached the cabin. Jack returned from town shortly before sunset. Something immediately felt wrong. The instinct arrived first, then the evidence. Fresh tire tracks. Not his. A vehicle had been on the property. Recently. Rex noticed too. The German Shepherd became alert instantly. His ear ushers lifted. His body stiffened. Jack grabbed the rifle he kept legally secured inside the truck. Not out of fear, out of caution. Years of training. The two moved toward the cabin together. Silent, methodical, professional. The front door stood slightly open. Jack froze. He knew he had locked it. Rex moved ahead, low, focused. The dog followed a scent trail directly inside. Furniture remained untouched. Nothing appeared stolen, yet someone had definitely been there. Searching. Looking. Hunting. The realization hit immediately. They weren't after the cabin. They were after the vault. Someone knew or suspected. Rex suddenly growled. A deep sound. Warning. Jack followed him toward the rear of the property. The trail led into the workshop. A shadow moved. Fast. Then vanished through the back door. The intruder fled immediately. No confrontation. No dramatic struggle. Only escape. The person disappeared into the trees before Jack could identify them. But the message remained. The secret was attracting predators. Real ones. Jack returned to the cabin as darkness settled over the mountains. His pulse remained elevated. The legal battle had begun. The media attention was growing. Someone had already broken into the property, and somehow the situation continued getting worse. Rex stood beside the fireplace once more, watching, guarding, protecting, the same way he always had. Jack knelt beside him, placed a hand on the dog's shoulder. The German Shepherd leaned into the touch. Loyal, steady, fearless, the only thing in Jack's life that had never betrayed him. Outside, snow began falling again. Inside, the hidden fortune remained secure beneath stone and timber. But Walter's prediction was becoming reality. The wolves had arrived, and they were growing bolder. What neither Jack nor Rex knew was that the next attack would be far more personal, and Rex would soon pay the price for protecting the man he refused to abandon. Winter tightened its grip on the mountains. Days grew shorter. Nights arrived faster. The legal battle continued gaining momentum. Every few days, another document arrived from Brent's attorneys. Another accusation, another challenge, another attempt to paint Jack as an unstable veteran, incapable of managing the inheritance. Jack expected it now. What he didn't expect was how exhausting it would become. The constant pressure, the endless scrutiny, the feeling that strangers were dissecting his life from a distance. Some mornings he woke already tired. Some nights sleep never came at all. PTSD had always been part of his life. Now stress was feeding it. The nightmares returned more frequently. Faces from old deployments, friends who never came home, memories he spent years trying to survive. Through all of it, Rex remained exactly where he always was, beside him. One night Jack woke gasping. The nightmare had felt real, too real. Sweat covered his forehead despite the cold cabin. The darkness seemed alive. His heart raced. The familiar panic began creeping in. Then a warm muzzle touched his hand. Rex. The German Shepherd stood beside the bed, calm, patient, grounding him, pulling him back into reality. Jack slowly rested a hand on the dog's neck. His breathing steadied. The panic retreated, like it always did. Thanks, partner. Rex simply stayed. He never needed praise, never needed recognition. Only purpose. And protecting Jack had become his purpose. The next morning began peacefully. Snow covered the clearing. Sunlight reflected across the frozen lake. The mountains looked almost unreal beneath the blue sky. Jack spent several hours repairing fencing near the edge of the property. The physical work helped, kept his mind occupied, kept the legal chaos from consuming every thought. Rex moved nearby, patrolling, watching, occasionally disappearing into the trees before returning minutes later, always checking, always working. The old military habits never truly left either of them. Shortly after noon, a vehicle approached the property. Not unusual anymore. Harold Finch visited regularly. So did Earl Thompson. Sometimes reporters attempted to get closer than they should. Jack expected another visitor. Instead, he saw a black SUV, unfamiliar. The vehicle stopped near the road. The driver remained inside, watching. Jack immediately felt uneasy. Years of training sharpened his instincts. Something wasn't right. Rex noticed too. The dog froze. His posture changed instantly. Alert, focused, protective. The SUV remained motionless for nearly 5 minutes. Then it drove away. No explanation, no conversation. Just observation. Watching. The same way predators studied prey. Jack didn't like it. Not one bit. That evening the sky darkened unusually early. Heavy clouds rolled across the mountains. Another storm approaching. Jack secured equipment around the property before heading inside. Rex remained restless. The dog checked every window, every door, every corner of the cabin. Jack noticed. The behavior reminded him of deployments before trouble arrived. Animals often sensed tension before humans did. After dinner, Jack descended into the hidden chamber. The vault had become a refuge, a place where Walter's journals helped him understand the old veteran better, and perhaps understand himself. Rex followed closely. Together they moved through the chamber. The underground space felt almost sacred now, a preserved record of one man's life, one man's wisdom, one man's preparation. Jack spent hours reviewing journals. Then, near midnight, he discovered something new. A narrow cabinet hidden behind several shelves. The compartment blended seamlessly into the stone wall. Easy to miss. Very easy. Walter had concealed it intentionally. Jack opened it carefully. Inside sat a single metal box, smaller than the others. Different. Personal. His pulse quickened. The box contained one envelope. Nothing else. Across the front, Walter had written, "For the day you doubt yourself." Jack sat at the desk and opened it. The letter inside was brief. "Jack, if you're reading this, then the pressure is working. The lawsuits, the attacks, the questions. They will try to convince you that you're broken. Do not believe them. You survived things most people cannot imagine. That does not make you weak. It makes you tested. There is a difference." Jack stared at the page. The words hit harder than he expected, because lately he had been doubting himself, questioning everything, wondering whether the fight was worth it, wondering whether Walter had made a mistake. The letter continued. "Your scars are evidence of service, not failure. And remember this. The people attacking you would never survive what you already survived." For several moments, Jack simply sat there, silent. The room blurred slightly, not from tears, from relief. Walter seemed to understand things nobody else did, things even Jack struggled to explain. Rex rested beside the desk, watching him quietly. Loyal as ever. Then something happened. The dog suddenly stood, immediately, without warning. His ears snapped forward. A low growl emerged from deep inside his chest. Jack froze, every instinct activated. The growl wasn't curiosity, it wasn't concern, it was danger, real danger. Rex moved toward the staircase, fast, focused. Jack grabbed his flashlight and followed. The dog raced upward, the hidden passage, the cabin above. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The moment Jack emerged into the main room, he understood. The front door stood open. Wind blew snow across the floorboards. The cabin was supposed to be locked. Jack's pulse exploded. Someone was inside, or had been. Rex charged toward the rear hallway. The growl deepened. Jack followed immediately. Then he heard movement. A crash. Footsteps. A shadow darted through the workshop doorway. The intruder had returned. The person fled toward the back of the property. Jack pursued instinctively. Years of military training taking over. Snow crunched beneath his boots. The figure disappeared between the trees. Then something happened so quickly it barely registered. A loud crack echoed through the forest. Not a gunshot. A breaking branch. A falling limb. The recent storms had weakened several trees. One massive branch snapped loose above the trail, directly over Jack. He never saw it. Rex did. The German shepherd lunged, hard, powerful. The impact knocked Jack sideways into the snow. A split second later, the heavy branch crashed into the ground where he had been standing. The force shook the earth. Snow exploded into the air. Silence followed. Then pain. A sharp yelp. Jack's heart stopped. "Rex!" The dog lay several feet away, breathing, conscious, but injured. The branch had struck part of his hind leg during the rescue. Jack was beside him instantly. K9 medic mode activated automatically inside his head. Training, experience, instinct. He examined the injury carefully. Not life-threatening. Thank God. But serious enough. Rex whined softly. Jack's chest tightened. The sound felt worse than any pain he had experienced himself, because Rex had taken the risk for him. Again, just like overseas, just like countless times before. The intruder was gone, forgotten. Nothing mattered except the dog. Jack carefully carried Rex back to the cabin. The German Shepherd remained calm despite the discomfort, trusting him completely. The nearest veterinarian sat nearly an hour away. Snow covered the roads. The drive felt endless. Jack never took his eyes off Rex. The vet clinic lights finally appeared after midnight. The examination felt like an eternity. Eventually, the veterinarian emerged. Good news. The leg wasn't broken. Severe bruising, minor ligament damage. Time and rest would heal it. Relief hit Jack harder than he expected. His knees nearly gave out. For hours he had imagined losing another partner, another teammate, another friend. The fear had been overwhelming. Back at the cabin, Rex slept near the fireplace, wrapped in blankets. Safe. Jack sat beside him long after midnight. The legal battle, the inheritance, the money. None of it mattered in that moment, because for a few terrifying hours, he had almost lost the one thing that remained constant in his life: his partner, his friend, his family. As the fire crackled softly, Jack looked toward the hidden chamber beneath the floor. Walter's letter remained open below. And suddenly he remembered something: a final compartment. One section of the vault he had not fully explored. One locked drawer inside Walter's desk. The old veteran had hidden countless things. Perhaps one more remained. Jack glanced at the sleeping dog, then toward the floor beneath the fireplace. Somewhere below them waited another message, another secret. And perhaps the one thing capable of helping him survive the battle that was still coming. Because Brent Mercer hadn't finished. The lawsuit hadn't finished. The wolves were still circling, and Walter Mercer had prepared for all of it. Even this. 3 weeks later, winter settled fully across Montana. Snow covered the roads. Ice clung to the pine trees. The mountains stood silent beneath gray skies. Inside the cabin, Rex was healing. The veterinarian's prediction had proven correct. The injury wasn't permanent, but recovery required patience, something neither Jack nor Rex enjoyed. The German Shepherd hated resting. Every morning he attempted to patrol the property. Every morning Jack ordered him back to his bed. The arguments were brief and entirely one-sided. Still, watching Rex recover gave Jack something to focus on. Something real. Something more important than lawyers. Because the legal battle had become a monster. Court filings multiplied weekly. New accusations appeared constantly. Brent's attorneys painted Jack as unstable, unfit, irresponsible. They used his PTSD, his homelessness, his financial struggles. Every hardship became evidence. Every scar became a weapon. The strategy was obvious. If they couldn't challenge Walter's will directly, they would challenge the man who inherited it. The pressure never stopped. Then one morning, Harold Finch arrived carrying a box. Not paperwork, not legal documents. A box. The old attorney looked unusually serious. Jack immediately noticed. What happened? Finch placed the box on the table. I found something. Jack frowned. What kind of something? The attorney removed a small metal key, then several documents, then a VHS tape. Jack stared. The tape looked ancient. "What is that?" Finch smiled. "I think it's your victory." Silence filled the cabin. Even Rex lifted his head. Finch explained, years earlier Walter had rented a safety deposit box in Helena. The key had remained hidden among additional estate records. Nobody knew it existed, not even Finch. Until now. The contents had been waiting for decades. The tape, the documents, and one sealed letter. Jack's pulse quickened. Walter again. Always Walter. The old veteran seemed to keep reaching forward through time, protecting him, preparing him. Finch carefully handed over the letter. The handwriting was unmistakable. "For the day they come after you." Jack looked at the attorney. Neither spoke. Slowly, he opened it. Inside sat a single page. "Jack, if this letter has been opened, then events unfolded exactly as I expected. The lawsuits, the accusations, the attacks on your character. I anticipated all of them. Watch the tape, then let them make their case. Do not interrupt them. Do not stop them. Let them commit fully to their lies, then show them the truth." Walter, Jack stared at the words. A chill moved through him. Walter had predicted everything. Again. Finch slid the VHS tape across the table. "We found an old player in storage." The attorney smiled faintly. "I think Walter wanted us to see this." They connected the equipment inside the cabin that evening. The image flickered. Static filled the screen. Then a face appeared. Walter Mercer. Older, thinner, but unmistakably Walter. The room fell silent. Even the crackling fire seemed quieter. Walter sat at the same oak desk inside the hidden chamber, the vault visible behind him, the collection surrounding him. He looked directly into the camera, directly into the future. "My name is Walter Mercer." His voice sounded calm, steady, certain, the kind of voice people trusted. "Today is March 14th. He paused. "If you are watching this, then I am likely gone." Jack felt his chest tighten. The old veteran continued. "I am recording this because I know exactly what will happen after my death." The words landed heavily. Walter looked straight into the camera. "Some members of my family will challenge my decision." Another pause. "They will claim concern." A faint smile crossed his face. "They will pretend this is about protection." The smile disappeared. "It is not." Jack exchanged a glance with Finch. Every prediction had already happened. Every single one. Walter continued speaking. "I have spent decades observing the people involved." The old veteran reached for several folders. "Documents, records, evidence. I am of sound mind." He lifted medical evaluations, financial statements, legal certifications, everything professionally documented. "I understand exactly what I own." More paperwork, more proof. "I understand exactly who I am leaving it to." Then Walter leaned forward. His eyes sharpened. "And most importantly, I understand exactly who I am not leaving it to." Silence. Powerful silence. The old veteran looked directly into the camera. "I chose Jack Mercer because of character." The words echoed through the room. Not money, not success, not status. Character. Walter continued. "I watched him serve. Photographs appeared. Military records, commendations, service documents. I watched him struggle. More records, employment histories, housing records, evidence of hardship. I watched him fall." Walter paused, then smiled, and I watched him get back up. Jack looked away briefly. The emotions hit harder than expected. The old veteran had seen everything. The failures, the losses, The years nobody else wanted to remember. Walter saw them all, and judged him worthy anyway. The recording continued. For anyone claiming Jack lacks capacity because of PTSD, Walter's expression hardened. I reject that argument completely. The words felt like a hammer. Surviving trauma does not make a person incapable. Another pause. If anything, it proves strength. Jack swallowed hard. Beside him, Rex rested quietly near the fireplace. The dog had become part of every chapter of this journey. Walter smiled slightly. And if Rex is nearby while you watch this? Jack blinked, then looked at the screen. Walter somehow knew. Again. The old veteran chuckled softly. Good. The smile widened. That means the best member of the family found the vault first. Jack actually laughed, for the first time in days. Even Finch smiled. The recording ended with one final message, the most important one. If anyone attempts to overturn my wishes, Walter looked directly into the camera, directly into the future, directly at the people challenging him. You are not fighting Jack. His eyes narrowed slightly. You are fighting me. The screen faded. Static returned. Silence filled the cabin. Nobody spoke, not immediately. Finally, Finch broke the silence. Well, Jack nodded slowly. Yeah. The attorney smiled. They're in trouble. Court arrived 6 days later. The Jefferson County Courthouse stood beneath fresh snow. Reporters crowded outside. Camera crews waited. Local residents gathered. The story had grown beyond Montana. A homeless veteran. A hidden fortune. A family war. America loved stories like that. Jack hated every second of it. Rex remained beside him, still recovering, still loyal, still refusing to stay behind. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere felt electric. Brent sat with his attorneys, confident, almost smug. Denise appeared equally certain. Travis looked nervous, for the first time. Good. Jack took his seat beside Harold Finch and the defense team. The hearing began. Hours passed. Brent's attorneys presented argument after argument. PTSD, financial instability, poor judgment. Everything Jack expected. Every accusation Walter predicted. The strategy appeared polished, professional, convincing, at least until the defense stood. Then Finch introduced the tape. The courtroom changed instantly. The judge watched every second. So did the reporters. So did Brent, and Denise, and Travis. The confidence slowly drained from their faces, because Walter dismantled every argument before it could survive. His documentation proved competency. His records proved intent. His testimony destroyed their narrative. By the time the recording ended, the outcome felt obvious. The judge sat quietly for several moments, reviewing notes, reviewing evidence, reviewing the truth. Finally, she spoke. The court finds no basis for overturning Walter Mercer's wishes. Relief swept through Jack instantly, but the judge wasn't finished. She continued. The evidence clearly demonstrates Mr. Mercer acted intentionally, rationally, and with full legal capacity. Brent stared downward. The fight was over. The judge looked toward him, then toward Denise, then Travis. This court also finds the challenge lacked merit. The words landed like a verdict, because they were. The judge closed the file. Petition denied. The gavel struck. Everything ended. Just like that. Months of stress. Months of attacks. Months of pressure. Finished. The courtroom erupted into conversation. Reporters rushed toward the exits. Attorneys gathered papers. People stood, moved, talked. But Jack remained seated, silent, still processing. Beside him, Rex rested calmly. The dog looked tired, but peaceful. Jack placed one hand on his partner's neck. The familiar warmth grounded him, steadied him. They had won. Not because of money, not because of lawyers. Because Walter had prepared. Because Walter had believed in him. And because a loyal German shepherd refused to abandon the man he loved. Outside, snow drifted softly across the courthouse steps. The mountains stood silent in the distance. The battle was finally over. But Walter Mercer had one final surprise still waiting. One final truth hidden beneath the pines, and it would change Jack's understanding of everything that had happened. The drive back to the cabin felt different. For the first time since arriving in Montana, Jack wasn't carrying the weight of uncertainty. The lawsuit was over. The threats had failed. The inheritance was secure. The cabin was his. The mountains stretching across the horizon no longer felt temporary. They felt like home. Snow drifted across the winding road as Harold Finch drove. Rex rested in the back seat. His injured leg continued improving every day. Occasionally, the German shepherd lifted his head to watch the passing forest. Always alert, always watchful. Jack glanced back several times during the drive, not because he doubted the dog was okay, because he was grateful, more grateful than words could express. Without Rex, none of this would have happened. The vault would still be hidden. Walter's journals would remain buried. The fortune would remain undiscovered. And Jack might not even be alive. The realization followed him all the way back to the cabin. By the time they reached the property, dusk had settled over the mountains. The forest glowed blue beneath the fading winter sky. Smoke rose from the chimney. The cabin stood exactly as it had for decades. Strong, silent, waiting. Harold Finch stepped onto the porch and removed a small envelope from his coat pocket. I almost forgot. Jack looked up. What's that? The attorney smiled. The last item from Walter's estate. Jack accepted the envelope. His pulse quickened immediately. Walter's handwriting covered the front. For Jack and the dog. Jack froze. Even after everything, even after the lawsuit, Walter somehow still had one final surprise waiting. Finch smiled knowingly. I'll leave you two alone. Within minutes, the attorney's truck disappeared down the snow-covered road. Silence returned. Only wind moved through the pines. Jack stepped inside. Rex followed. The warmth of the cabin wrapped around them. Firelight danced across the walls. Snow tapped softly against the windows. For a long moment, Jack simply stood there. Then he opened the envelope. Inside sat a folded letter and a hand-drawn map. His brow furrowed. The map showed a section of the property, a location near the edge of the lake, a place marked with a simple X. Jack unfolded the letter. Walter's familiar handwriting filled the page. Jack, if you are reading this, then you won. I suspected you would. Not because life is fair. Because you are stubborn enough to keep moving when life isn't. That quality matters. The map enclosed with this letter leads to something I never included in the vault, something I wanted discovered only after everything else was finished. Take Rex with you. He earned this as much as you did. Jack smiled despite himself, then continued reading. There is one final truth you deserve to know, and one final reason I chose you. Walter. Jack looked toward Rex. The dog was already watching him, as if he somehow understood. Maybe he did. The next morning dawned cold and clear. Fresh snow covered the property. The mountains shimmered beneath sunlight. Jack tucked the map into his jacket, then headed outside with Rex. The marked location sat nearly half a mile from the cabin, near the far edge of the frozen lake. The walk took longer because of the snow, but neither seemed to mind. The forest felt peaceful, alive, the kind of wilderness that reminded Jack why he loved Montana, why Walter had spent decades here. Eventually they reached the location, a clearing among towering pines. Nothing looked unusual, no structures, no markers, no clues. Jack studied the map again, then noticed something. A weathered wooden post partially buried beneath snow. Old. Very old. He brushed away the snow. Letters emerged, barely visible. Rex immediately moved closer, sniffing, investigating. The post marked a small stone circle. Jack's pulse quickened. Carefully he began clearing snow, then leaves, then dirt. At the center he found a metal box, smaller than expected, protected from weather, protected from time, protected by intention. Walter wanted this found. Eventually, Jack carried it back to the cabin. The entire walk home his mind raced. What could possibly remain hidden after everything already discovered? That evening he opened the box. Inside rested 3 items: a photograph, a leather journal, and another letter. Jack reached for the photograph first. The image stopped him cold. 2 young soldiers stood beside each other. Vietnam, early 1970s. One was clearly Walter. The other looked familiar, painfully familiar. Jack stared, then understood. The second man was his father, young, smiling, alive. For a long moment he couldn't breathe. His hands trembled slightly. He had never seen the photograph before. The image captured a friendship, a brotherhood, something deeper than family stories had ever explained. Jack opened the journal. Walter's personal writing filled the pages. Memories, reflections, stories from war, stories about Jack's father, stories about promises made long ago. One entry caught his attention immediately. If anything ever happens to me, I hope someone like Jack finds this place someday. Someone loyal. Someone willing to protect others before himself. Someone like his father. Jack swallowed hard, then turned the page. The next entry changed everything. Walter wrote about designing the hidden chamber, the vault, the mechanisms, the secret entrance, the years spent building it. Then came one sentence, the sentence that explained everything. The vault was never designed to be found by chance. It was designed to be found by a man who trusted his dog. Jack stared at the words, then read them again. Walter continued. Most people ignore animals. Most people dismiss loyalty. Most people would have pulled their dog away from the fireplace after the first day. You didn't. You trusted him. That is why you found the vault. Without Rex, none of this would ever have been discovered. Jack slowly lowered the journal. Silence filled the cabin. Across the room, Rex slept peacefully near the fire. Completely unaware, or perhaps completely aware. The dog who refused to stop digging. The dog who refused to walk away. The dog who saved his life. Walter had counted on that kind of loyalty, counted on it decades earlier, and he had been right. The final letter remained. Jack unfolded it carefully. The handwriting seemed shakier than before. Walter must have written it near the end of his life. Jack. The world spends too much time measuring people by money. I spent my life learning that money is rarely the thing that matters most. Character matters. Purpose matters. Loyalty matters. I watched you lose everything. I watched you continue helping others anyway. That is why I chose you. The fortune is only a tool. What you build with it is the real inheritance. The words hit deeper than any amount of money ever could. Jack finished reading, then sat quietly. The fire crackled. Wind moved softly outside. Snow drifted through the darkness. For the first time in years, something inside him felt settled, not fixed, not healed completely. PTSD didn't disappear. Memories didn't vanish. But the emptiness was gone. The feeling of drifting. The feeling of being lost. Walter had given him more than money. He had given him direction. Months passed. Spring eventually arrived. Snow melted. Wildflowers returned. The Mercer Veterans Sanctuary officially opened on the mountain property. The first residents arrived that summer. Homeless veterans, military families struggling to rebuild, retired service dogs needing care, people who understood loss, people searching for purpose, people who needed a second chance. Jack poured himself into the mission. Every cabin built, every veteran helped, every family supported. Each one felt meaningful. The property transformed slowly, not into a luxury estate, into something useful, something alive, something Walter would have been proud of. And at the center of everything stood Rex. The old German shepherd became the symbol of the sanctuary. Visitors knew his story. The dog who discovered the hidden vault. The dog who protected his partner. The dog who never gave up. Children loved him. Veterans trusted him. Everyone who met him seemed to understand immediately why Jack spoke about him with such respect. One autumn evening, nearly a year after the court victory, Jack sat on the porch watching sunset spill gold across the mountains. The sanctuary lights glowed softly below. Veterans gathered around fire pits. Families laughed. Dogs played in open fields. Life moved forward. Rex rested beside him, older now, a little slower, but still exactly where he wanted to be, at Jack's side. The sky turned orange, then purple, then deep blue. Stars emerged overhead, the same stars Walter had watched, the same stars Jack once believed he would never enjoy again. For a long time, neither man nor dog moved. They simply watched, listened, breathed. Finally, Jack reached down and rested one hand on Rex's neck. "Looks like we found our mission, partner." Rex lifted his head. His tail thumped once against the porch boards. Jack smiled, because he finally understood. The true inheritance had never been $265 million. It wasn't the artwork, the gold, the investments, the hidden vault. The true inheritance was purpose, a reason to keep moving, a chance to build something that outlasted pain, a chance to help others find their way home. Walter Mercer had understood that. Rex had led him to it. And now, beneath the pines of western Montana, surrounded by people rebuilding their lives, Jack Mercer finally understood it too. The mountains stood silent around them. The sanctuary lights glowed warmly below. The future stretched wide and open. And for the first time since leaving the Navy SEALs, Jack Mercer no longer felt lost. He felt needed. He felt grateful. He felt home. Beside him, Rex rested peacefully. The loyal dog who had uncovered a hidden fortune. The loyal dog who had saved a life. The loyal dog who never abandoned his partner. As darkness settled over the mountains, Warrior and K9 sat together watching new veterans arrive at the sanctuary. A new chapter beginning. A legacy continuing. And somewhere beyond the pines, beyond the stars, beyond time itself, Walter Mercer's final gift continued changing lives. Exactly as he had planned. If you believe loyalty and character matter more than money, Type yes in the comments. And if you've ever had a dog, friend, or family member stand by you when life got hard, tell us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your story. Remember, the people who stay steady through the storm are often the ones who build something worth leaving behind. And if you enjoy stories about justice, dignity, perseverance, and the American spirit, consider subscribing and joining us for the next story.